My world crumbled. In a sterile grey office, they told me I was fired for being a failure. They never imagined their failure would cost them over $250,000. But to understand how it all ended, you need to know how it began. This isn't just a story about getting fired. It's a story about a promise. A promise I made to myself to be a great creator. And a promise my manager made that she never, ever intended to keep. It all started in the early 2010s. I was fresh out of school, my head filled with ideas from watching Scorsese films and early YouTube pioneers. I didn't just want a job, I wanted a canvas. YouTube content creator wasn't the title you see today. It was the Wild West, a new frontier. Brands were just starting to realize its power, and I was hungry, desperate even, to make my mark. When Northwood University, my own alma mater, offered me the role, it felt like destiny. I jumped at the chance. The pay was low, around $2,200 a month, which even back then was barely enough to get by. But I didn't care. I saw the potential. It was a chance to build something from the ground up, to create a legacy. I still remember holding my new ID card, the plastic crisp in my hands. The photo was of a younger, more hopeful me, grinning like an idiot. I was official. I was a professional. I was ready to pour my soul into the work and put Northwood University on the digital map. I would make them proud. I thought it was my dream job. I had no idea it was a trap. On my second day, I met my manager, Margaret Bishop. She had an office with a large, intimidating oak desk that was suspiciously clean. She had this practiced corporate warmth, a smile that was perfectly shaped but held no actual heat. She presented me with my key performance indicator, my KPI. The document felt heavy in my hands, multiple pages stapled together. It read, 85 videos, 3 to 10 minutes in length, to be completed in 52 weeks. I did the math in my head. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach as I did it again, hoping I was wrong. That's more than 1.5 videos every single week. For a one-man team in 2012, with the technology of the time, it was impossible. My mind raced, trying to calculate the hours. Scripting, casting, shooting, finding locations, editing, color grading, sound mixing. It just didn't add up. And I knew in that moment, she had to know it too. This wasn't a goal, it was a setup. I had to let her know. This wasn't me being lazy, this was me being a professional. I said, Margaret, I'm incredibly excited to start, but I need to be transparent about this number. To do this properly, it's a monumental task for one person. I explained that I wasn't just an editor. I was the writer, the producer, the director, the cameraman, the sound guy, and even the music composer. Because the university was too cheap to pay for a simple, royalty-free music license. My first day, I had asked to see the equipment closet. It was a dusty room with a 10-year-old camera that recorded on tapes, and a computer that took 5 minutes just to boot up. The place smelled of decay. So I explained that all of this work would be on my own equipment. My laptop, my software, my camera. Their gear couldn't even handle a 720p export without sounding like a jet engine preparing for takeoff. It was a complete joke. So I explained it to her, calmly. I laid out the man-hours, the technical limitations, the sheer logistical nightmare of what he was asking. I ended by saying, "Margaret, I want to create the best possible content, but I want to set a realistic expectation." She just smiled that same placid smile, and in the sweetest, most patronizing voice, she said, "Just give it a try, Alex. I have a feeling you can handle it. And remember," and this was the line that sealed my fate, "we're looking for quality. If the videos are truly excellent, the final number won't be what I focus on. Just make us proud." It was the perfect thing to say to a young, ambitious kid. She wasn't just giving me a task. She was giving me a challenge. And I was naive enough to accept it. And like a fool, I believed her. Quality over quantity. That was the promise. It became my mantra. So I accepted the impossible. I poured my entire being into the work. The first month was a blur of caffeine and creativity. Days bled into nights. I scripted during my lunch breaks, hunched over a notepad in the university cafeteria. I cast student actors by putting up flyers, promising them a free pizza for a day's work. I filmed on weekends, hauling my gear all over campus. I edited until my eyes burned and the letters on my keyboard were a blur. I was running on fumes, a ghost haunting the university's media department, fueled by stale coffee and a naive belief in meritocracy. I practically lived in my small, windowless office. I was working over 60 hours a week, 6 days a week. My friends stopped calling, assuming I was busy. They were right. But I kept telling myself it was worth it, because the work was good. My first big project was a profile on a charismatic, slightly eccentric history professor. The university wanted a simple, boring interview. I turned it into a mini documentary, following him through the archives, capturing his passion. The video exploded. It got thousands of views in a week. Students were sharing it. Alumni were commenting. For the first time, the university's YouTube channel actually had a pulse. I was exhausted, physically and mentally drained. But I was proud. I printed out a few of the positive comments and pinned them to the wall of my tiny office. They were my medals. I was delivering on my end of the bargain. I was delivering the quality she asked for. And then, everything changed. It happened on a Tuesday. A single, insignificant moment that derailed my entire career at that university. It was a stressful afternoon. A video file had corrupted, and I'd lost hours of work. I went outside to the designated area to have a cigarette and clear my head. As I was standing there, Margaret walked by. She didn't break her stride. She just glanced over, and her face, for a split second, contorted into a look of pure, unadulterated disgust. Then, just as quickly, it was gone, replaced by her usual neutral mask. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. I just gave her a polite nod, but a cold dread washed over me. I didn't think anything more of it. I was wrong. The next day, the chill was undeniable. The fake warmth was gone. Her emails became shorter, sharper. Her good mornings stopped. Later that week, a colleague, Sarah from the marketing department, pulled me aside by the coffee machine. She looked genuinely worried. "Alex," she said, her voice low, "be careful. Margaret isn't smoking. She's the head of the campus wellness committee. She sees it as a moral failing." Sarah leaned in closer. "Listen to me," she whispered. "Last year, there was a guy in accounting, a great worker. He smoked. She made his life a living hell with microaggressions and impossible deadlines until he quit. She gets an idea in her head about someone, and that's it. Sarah was right. It was death by 1,000 cuts. Suddenly, my 60-hour weeks meant nothing. My 4 hours of daily overtime were invisible. All that mattered was that I arrived at 9:05 a.m. after staying until 10 p.m. the night before. All that mattered was the faint smell of smoke on my jacket. I started getting passive-aggressive emails with other managers CC'd. She questioned my creative choices on scripts she'd already approved, in writing. She'd ask why I wasn't reachable the second my 30-minute lunch break started, even though she knew I was across campus filming. It was a relentless campaign of psychological warfare, designed to break me down. To build a paper trail of my supposed incompetence. But I kept my head down. I soldiered on. I let the work, the numbers, the view counts speak for me. I thought that in the end, the results would be undeniable. 5 months into the job, the email landed in my inbox. The subject line was simple: meeting with Director Evans. My stomach turned to ice. It wasn't a request, it was a summons. I knew. You always know. I walked that long, quiet hallway to the director's office on the top floor. It felt like a mile. The sound of my own shoes on the polished linoleum floor was deafening. I passed Sarah's desk and she gave me a small, sympathetic look that told me everything. My mind was racing, preparing my defense. I had the numbers, the analytics, the proof of my hard work and success. I was ready to fight for my job. I opened the door, and there she was, Margaret, sitting next to the director, a folder of papers neatly arranged in front of her. She had on her best, displeased but gleeful face. She looked like a predator who had finally cornered her prey and was about to enjoy the meal. The director, a woman named Evans, who I'd only met once, didn't even make eye contact. She just gestured to the chair in front of her desk. Director Evans didn't waste any time. She didn't ask how I was. She just looked down at a paper on her desk and said, "Alex, we're disappointed." Her voice was flat, rehearsed. It was the voice of someone who had already made their decision. "Margaret tells me you're falling significantly behind on your work. We're nearly halfway through the year and you've only completed 30 videos. My mind was reeling. 30 videos in 5 months. Alone. It was a Herculean effort. I tried to explain. My carefully prepared defense came pouring out. I laid out the 60-hour weeks, the 6-day work weeks. The fact that these 30 videos had generated a 500% increase in channel viewership and a 700% increase in subscriber count. I had the printouts with me. I pushed them across the desk. I looked right at Margaret, searching for any sign of support, any acknowledgement of her promise. I said, Margaret herself said she was looking for quality over quantity. The Alumni Association just sent an email praising the new video series. These videos are performing beyond anyone's expectations. This is the quality you ask for. She just gave a tiny, almost imperceptible shake of her head. A perfect little pantomime of disappointment, as if I were a child throwing a tantrum. She looked at the director and said, "He has a lot of passion, but he struggles with time management." The director dismissed my printouts with a wave of her hand without even looking at them. The KPI is the KPI, Alex. It's not about feelings, it's about numbers. 85 videos, you're not on track. We've decided it's prudent to cut the cord now. And that was it. 5 months of my life, my health, my passion, erased in 5 minutes by a woman who had been poisoning the well for months. I was bewildered, numb. I asked them, my voice hollow, "How do you even plan to meet the KPI without me?" And that's when Margaret, arrogant and victorious, let it slip. She snorted, a little puff of triumphant air. "We'll find a professional production house to finish your work." She said the word professional with a slight emphasis. A final little dig meant just for me. The director gave her an odd look, a flicker of surprise, but just nodded. And as they talked over me, discussing severance details as if I wasn't even there, a single phrase echoed in my mind. Production house. Margaret had no contacts in the production industry. I knew this for a fact. In my first month, I had asked her for recommendations, and she just handed me a phone book. She was a bureaucrat, a manager who lived in a world of spreadsheets and memos. She didn't know the first thing about the creative world. So where would she find one? She'd use the database. My mind flashed to a file on my computer. A meticulously curated list of local and national production companies I had built over months. I had their contacts, their specialties, their price ranges, and my personal notes on their work. It was my professional Rolodex. It was the one I had painstakingly built, the one stored on my old work computer, the one I still had full administrative access to for the next 24 hours. I was escorted back to my desk to pack my things. I moved in a daze, throwing my notebooks and personal effects into a sad little cardboard box. I saw the comments I had pinned to my wall. I could see the whole thing in my mind. Margaret, desperate to prove she could deliver on the project she now owned, would be in a panic. She would open that file, my file, as her only lifeline. She would start making calls, completely unaware that the game was rigged. A smile crept onto my face for the first time that day. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who had just realized he wasn't holding a shield anymore. He was holding a sword. The trap was set, and my former manager was about to walk right into it, blissfully unaware that the failure she had just fired was about to become the architect of her downfall.